We are learning new details this morning about apparent classified documents in the private office of Joe Biden.
We'll take you straight to our chief White House correspondent, James Rosen, live on the North Lawn with the latest on this. Good morning, James.
Sean and Emma, good morning to you. White House attorneys this morning are swift to try to draw sharp distinctions between this case, newly disclosed, and the well-known ongoing federal criminal investigation into former President Trump's storage of classified materials at Mar-a-Lago. A White House emphasized that, quote, only a small number of documents with classified markings were found in this locked closet near Mr. Biden's office in Philadelphia, compared to the hundreds that FBI agents hauled off from Mr. Trump's home and office at Mar-a-Lago. The White House said the documents were discovered in early November, shortly before Election Day, by the president's own personal attorneys, who immediately notified the White House counsel's office, which in turn brought in the National Archives and the Justice Department. Now, to avoid any perceived conflict of interest in the investigation into the Biden documents, Attorney General Garland, according to published reports, has asked a federal prosecutor from outside of Main Justice to look into the case. The U.S. Attorney in Chicago, John Losh, one of only 2 U.S. attorneys left in the department who were appointed by President Trump. Losh will determine first what is in these documents, second, who brought them to the Penn Biden Center in Philadelphia, and third, whether any crimes occurred. White House Special Counsel Richard Sauber said in a statement last night, quote, the discovery of these documents was made by the president's attorneys. The documents were not the subject of any previous request or inquiry by the archives. Since that discovery, Sauber continued, the president's personal attorneys have cooperated with the archives and the Department of Justice in a process to ensure that any Obama-Biden administration records are appropriately in the possession of the archives. Now, a number of House Republicans already ramping up extensive investigations into President Biden, and members of his family have vowed swiftly now to probe this case as well. A number of them asking the question that former President Trump himself posed on Truth Social, quote, when is the FBI going to raid the many homes of Joe Biden, perhaps even the White House, unquote. Now, President Biden himself has yet to comment on this case publicly. He is in Mexico City, where last night featured an unexpectedly sharp exchange in the bilateral dialogue with Mr. Biden's host, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. In his opening statement, López Obrador referenced the White House event that was held on March 13, 1961, when President Kennedy welcomed leaders from Peru, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and other Western Hemisphere nations to announce the Alliance for Progress, a $20 billion plan to improve living conditions in Latin America and the Caribbean within 10 years.
This has been the only important thing, really, that has been done in terms of cooperation for development in our continent in more than half a century. Therefore, I hold that this is the moment for us to determine, to do away with this abandonment, this disdain, and this forgetfulness for Latin America and the Caribbean.
The United States provides more foreign aid than every other country just about combined in the world, to not just the hemisphere, but around the world. Unfortunately, our responsibility just doesn't end in the Western Hemisphere. It's in Central Europe, it's in Asia, it's in the Middle East, it's in Africa, it's in Southwest West Asia. And so it's not, I wish we could just have one focus, only one focus. We have multiple foci.
Today, as we have been reporting, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau joins the proceedings in Mexico City, thus the nickname for this, the Three Amigos Summit. Sean and Emma.
All right, James Rosen there on the North Lawn. We appreciate the report. James, thank you. In one of Kevin McCarthy's first tests as Speaker, House Republicans passing the rules package. This was Monday night. The conference then checked off one of their biggest legislative priorities.
Off to the races. Our congressional correspondent Kilmeny Dukart has been tracking these latest developments and joins us now live from the Capitol. Kilmeny, good morning.
Sean and Emma, good morning and good to be with you. With its narrow majority, the GOP managed to pass that rules package, the vote very much falling along party lines, with Democrats rejecting it And congressional representative lawmaker Tony Gonzalez voting against it, saying he didn't support defense spending cuts or the motion to vacate. Separately, he's also the only congressional lawmaker from Texas that did not sign on to the Texas border deal, which was one of the concessions that McCarthy made in exchange for those votes last week. Now, the 55-page document, the rules package, lays out the GOP priorities and how the party will govern, with an added list of, again, those concessions made by McCarthy to secure the speakership, including a plan to balance the budget, bringing bills through regular order, a vote on term limits, and allowing one member to call a no confidence vote in the speaker.
I could walk down right there into the well and file a motion to vacate single person right now, because that's the precedent. That's what we're operating under, because that goes back to Jefferson. The whole point here is trying to ensure that we're continuing the great history of the People's House. Yes, we have had conversations and agreements, as individuals are supposed to do, looking each other in the eye and saying, we're going to bring balanced budgets to the floor of the House.
Well, as McCarthy's first priority, Republicans voted to roll back tens of billions of dollars in funding for the Internal Revenue Service, approved under the Inflation Reduction Act, with Democrats rejecting the measure. McCarthy tweeting, House Republicans just voted unanimously to repeal the Democrats' army of 87,000 IRS agents. This was our very first act of the new Congress, because government should work for you, not against you. The Senate is not expected to take up that bill. We know that the House is supposed to take up a couple measures today, establishing a committee to study competition between China and the United States and the weaponization of the federal government. Among other priorities, it's expected this week. We know the Republican Majority Leader Steve Scalise says that there will also be a move to ban strategic petroleum reserve oil sales to China, among its other priorities.
Kilmeny, I just wanted to get something clear for our viewers, too. And obviously, some of this is inside baseball, but she's still with us, right? Okay. Some of it is inside baseball, but you hear Republicans in the House. They have majority. It's a narrow majority. You hear they're legislating what they want to get done, the 87,000 repealing of the IRS agents, pulling some money back from that, obviously looking into the DOJ, et cetera. But some of this has to get by the Senate. Is there any chance, in terms of the repealing of the 87,000 IRS agents, that this actually does go through a Democrat-controlled Senate?
Yeah, Sean, the consensus on the Hill seems to be that that legislation will not even be taken up for a vote. The possibility of it even being voted on is not even a discussion at this point.
All right, just wanted to reiterate that one there. But again, you can see where the priorities are by the House. But again, that explains how powerful Congress is, how it works, how powerful the Senate is in voting your vote in general. All right, Kilmeny Dukart live at the Capitol. Kilmeny, thank you. Want to bring in James Comer. He is a Kentucky congressman, chairman of the House Oversight Committee. Congratulations to you. I know a lot getting done, the rules package done. You got a speaker going, and there's a lot to get to in terms of what the House wants to do. You saw Kilmeny touch a little bit on that. I'm just curious to know your thoughts on, pushing forward the agenda of repealing money, if you will, from the IRS and the 87,000 agents, but knowing that maybe it doesn't have a future in the Senate. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is a great first step for the House Republicans. This bill signified that we are serious about reducing the size of government and reducing the number of federal employees by 87,000. That's a pretty good start. Obviously, it's going to face a tougher fate in the Senate. But you know what? We're going to pass a lot of bills and send down to the Senate. And then when it comes time for the Senate needing some House votes, we're going to negotiate. And the senators are just going to have to get on board with the fact that the American people elected a Republican House of Representatives, and they want the Congress to get serious about spending, and that's what we're going to do in the House. And, you know, it may take a while in the Senate, but we're going to force their hand at some point.
Yeah, we'll see if maybe you could win over some of those moderate Democrats who've got to go back to their district and explain why there are so many more IRS agents that could be looking into their taxes. Let me ask you about what I'm sure is a buzz right now in Washington. That story about those potentially classified documents found at the Biden Center. Congressman, do you plan on investigating this or calling for investigations? Tell me your thoughts.
Yes, we've already requested information. As we speak, these letters are going out. We're asking the head of the National Archives to come in and let us do a transcribed interview with that individual. We also have requested specific information from both the White House counsel and the National Archives pertaining to what went on with Biden's possession of classified information. Remember, Joe Biden was quick to criticize President Bush for having possession of apparent classified documents. He said that was irresponsible and reckless. Now we see that he did the same thing. Even worse, we see that there was a cover-up. This happened November the 2nd, the discovery of the classified documents at the Biden Center, but we're just now finding out about it because CBS broke the story last night. So obviously Joe Biden continues his pattern of not being transparent at all. He continues his pattern of cover-ups. We want to know exactly the same things we've asked about Trump. What type of documents does he have? And is the FBI going to raid the residence of Joe Biden like they did the residence of President Trump?
The other question, too, President Biden reportedly had no knowledge of these documents being stored in a locked closet in one of his offices, which would have dated back to 2017 during his vice presidency. He hasn't answered any questions. The media has asked, or at least a few reporters have asked him, but he has not responded, at least yet, to this news. Some of the news has, some of the documents reportedly are labeled SCI, sensitive compartmented information here. So the big question, what is on this? CNN putting out distinctions, though, between, as you brought up, between Trump and Biden. The DOJ is investigating classified documents on the current president and also the former president. So we'll leave it with that here. Perhaps your thoughts on that and how this could play out. Can the DOJ charge one president and not the other president on the handling of classified documents? Does this put the DOJ in a precarious scenario? And did the Democrats overplay their hand with Trump and the raid?
Yeah, that's a great question. This certainly would suggest another example of a two-tier justice system at the Department of Justice. I don't think anyone who watches Newsmax would disagree with the fact that the Department of Justice treats Republicans very differently than they treat Democrats. And President Trump has been treated very differently than every other former president. We know every former president has accidentally taken some documents that the National Archives claims that they shouldn't have, but none of them were ever raided. Now we know Joe Biden did the same thing. We don't know what extent because they're not going to tell us anything. And luckily the media uncovered this cover-up. So we're going to continue to ask questions. Now we have the gavel. Now we have the subpoena authority, and I expect the archivist with the National Archives to be paying a visit to the House Oversight Committee very soon, and we expect to do a transcribed interview with him that we'll be making public, and we'll be transparent with the press on exactly what's going on with both President Biden and President Trump, and why the discrepancy in how the National Archives handled the Trump documents versus the Biden documents.
All right. We'll be sure to follow up on it, all you uncover. Kentucky Congressman James Comer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.